Tonight, China's rapidly building its nuclear arsenal, how the U.S. is responding. And chronic stress on the rise.
We're all under too much stress.
What you can do to make your life more calm. Plus,
I've always tried to be transparent.
We sit down with Beth Moore to talk about her vulnerable new memoir. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. As a new arms race develops between world powers, questions if the U.S. is competing. Thanks for joining us. In Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. According to the Pentagon, China is adding to its nuclear arsenal, and with the help of Russia, could soon surpass the U.S. stockpile. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke is following the story. Caitlin, does the U.S. still have a nuclear edge?
Jenna, newly unclassified information from the Pentagon makes clear that while China is quickly gaining, it has not yet surpassed U.S. nuclear capabilities. At the end of 2022, however, the communist power had amassed more intercontinental range missile launchers, or ICBMs.
So that means kind of the holes that they would be able to put long-range missiles in, capable of striking the U.S. homeland. And so this is just the latest step in China's buildup.
While many of China's ICBMs remain empty, their strategic partnership with Russia is a concern.
Russia is providing fuel for China's reactors that produce nuclear material, these reactors that produce plutonium. And plutonium is the important nuclear material that China needs for its nuclear buildup.
U.S. intelligence officials predict Beijing will soon be able to produce enough weapons-grade plutonium to increase its nuclear warhead stockpile as much as fourfold in the next 12 years. Those nuclear warheads would likely fill the now empty ICBMs. That kind of a buildup would also allow China to match the arsenals currently deployed by the U.S. and Russia.
China is refusing to sit down and negotiate with us. To me, that tells us that China is on an upwards trajectory, and it has no interest in negotiating or stalling its nuclear buildup.
Shortly after the Chinese spy balloon dust-up, President Xi Jinping pressed military leaders for an even faster elevation of his armed forces. Meanwhile, Russia backed out of a nuclear arms control treaty with the U.S., leading experts to urge the Pentagon to develop a new strategy.
We can't simply just try again for arms control if it's not working. We'll have to do everything we can to strengthen our own nuclear deterrent and make sure we're building the right capabilities that we need to deter Russia and China, and make sure that they can't ever think that even as they build up their nuclear weapons that they can get away with using them.
The Heritage Foundation's Patty Jane Geller, a senior policy analyst for nuclear deterrence and missile defense, says U.S. capabilities have thus far stayed the same as Russia and China compete in an unofficial arms race to nuclear dominance.
The problem is the leaders in the arms race are Russia and China. The United States has not quite entered it yet.
Senior Pentagon officials say the U.S. is working to modernize all three legs of its land, sea, and air-based arsenals. The question remains whether the pace will be quick enough to keep our adversaries at bay. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin Burke, thank you very much. And for more on this, we're joined by Michael O'Hanlon, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institution. Michael, good to have you with us this evening. So as Caitlin said, we know China is moving fast. Is the U.S. keeping pace to maintain dominance?
Hi, Jenna. Well, we have 10 times the number of nuclear warheads right now that China does. And I think it's worth underscoring that basic fact. I appreciated the colleague at Heritage pointing out that China is changing that balance, and we've got to keep our eye on that. I think you have to begin from the foundation, which is that we have been way ahead of China throughout the entire nuclear age. And we're roughly equal. Russia and the United States each have about 5,000 nuclear warheads. And about a third of those are long-range warheads limited by this New START treaty that Putin just suspended. So in other words, we got 5,000 total, about 1,500, 1,600 that are long-range. China has historically had about 200 to 300 total nuclear stockpile. And now they're aiming to maybe be at 1,000 to 1,500, which if they put them all on long-range missiles does make them essentially our equal in the long-range nuclear competition by sometime in the 2030s. So yes, it's worth watching, but we are not unilaterally disarming, and we are modernizing all three legs of our nuclear triad. It's taking time because these are sophisticated systems, but you may have noticed the B-21 bomber was unveiled just a few months ago out at the Reagan Defense Forum during the time when that annual event happened in Southern California. And that's one piece of our modernization. And it's expected to have its first flight this year. That is a far better airplane than anything China or Russia can dream about. So we should keep our eye on this, but we should be, I think, reasonably calm and confident about our current position.
Michael, do you see Russia and China and maybe some other countries forming an alliance against the United States?
That's an excellent question. I don't think it'll be an alliance in the sense that if China attacked Taiwan, Russia is going to send 100,000 troops to fight with them. That's what we mean by alliances. We mean mutual defense. Attack on one is an attack on all. And we've really given alliances that kind of a very profound and serious meaning in the post-World War II era. China and Russia is more like a strategic alignment. They talk a lot. They think of ways they can opportunistically take advantage of one of them, distracting us in one place so the other can get away with something elsewhere. But they're not actively plotting war together, and they're not planning to literally fight together. So I would call it much more of a strategic realignment or alignment between those two countries as opposed to an alliance. It's still very worrisome because if they coordinate and both manufacture crises at the same time, that can really present us with a huge dilemma. The Pentagon does not currently size forces to be able to fight both Russia and China at the same time, for example. And so even if they're not fighting together, if they were somehow fighting us at the same time, that would already be reason enough for serious worry.
So Iran and Saudi Arabia have agreed to reestablish diplomatic relations and reopen their embassies. The deal was apparently brokered by China. Michael, how concerning is this to you?
The United States never likes it when other great powers get influential or involved in the broader Middle East. We like to think of that as our overall domain. Obviously, the regional countries that live there are the ones that fundamentally determine the course of events. But we've always tried to keep the Russians out, even the British and French. We didn't like them having too much influence after World War II. And this is not going to make any American strategists happy either. On the other hand, I don't see the Chinese being able to play anything like the role in the Middle East that we play. They don't have those kinds of deployable military forces that could go and be present in the Persian Gulf. And this kind of diplomacy, frankly, if it's in service of a rapprochement or at least a partial communication between Iran and Saudi Arabia, I don't think it's all that nefarious.
All right, Michael Hanlon with Brookings, always good to see you. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jenna. You too.
Well, the season of Lent is upon us. The 40 days leading up to Easter is a time of turning attention from worldly things to focus on spiritual growth. CBN's Billy Hollowell has some creative ways to fast, pray, and seek God during this season.
For millions of faithful, Lent is a time for prayer, repentance, and fasting. The observance, which extends from Ash Wednesday through Holy Week, has traditionally been a Catholic practice, although 20% of American Protestants also participate in an effort to get closer to God.
Christians traditionally try to focus on Christ's death and resurrection and ways that we can kind of prepare our hearts for the coming Easter season. And many Christians celebrate in all sorts of different ways.
Pastor Shane Eidelman explains the spiritual benefit of intentional fasting.
And as you're praying and fasting more, you're really drawn in to just experiencing God in a more profound and powerful way. One thing about fasting is it doesn't bend God's arm, but it bends my knees in a time of prayer and seeking Him.
We often hear of folks giving up chocolate, candy, or other food to place a deeper focus on Christ. Brittany counters that there are other ways to take part, even if you get a late start.
While I do love the structure of Lent, everybody going through it together, it is never too late to start a spiritual discipline. Whether that is giving something up or adding something in, if you are thinking right now, I should have given this thing up, or I should have started this new practice. I've been meaning to read my Bible more. I've been meaning to spend more time in prayer. There's no time like the present. You can start today.
While Lent is typically focused on abstaining from something, Brittany sometimes seeks to add to her routine, such as opting for more intentional quiet time or small acts of sacrifice for others.
Even unique ideas like taking a farther away parking space. Maybe you're just going to give that little sacrifice so that somebody else can have a special space. Maybe you're going to pay for the person in front of you. There's all kinds of things you can do.
Pastor Eidelman believes fasting, regardless of the time of the year, is a biblical practice that can offer a spiritual recharge and a deeper relationship with the Almighty.
It's powerful when your heart's right. You know, you walk into just this season where you've repented. Your self-discipline, I don't think it should be a period of 6 weeks of self-discipline and then give up and go back to our old habits. You know, this is a time to really instill some good habits into our life.
Though we're already in the middle of Lent, it's never too late to dive in. After all, the biblical benefits of fasting can clearly be gleaned at any time of the year. Consider praying, seeking the Lord, and following His cues on how to proceed. This is Billy Hollowell for CBN News.
Well, is chronic stress keeping you down? Coming up, what you can do to bring a sense of peace to your life. Welcome back. In economic news tonight, the U.S. added a strong 311,000 jobs in February. That's according to today's Labor Department jobs report. Even so, unemployment did see a slight rise, up to 3.6% from January's 53-year low of 3.4%. Today's report shows a robust job market, which puts pressure on the Federal Reserve to continue raising interest rates to fight inflation. Well, if you feel stressed, you are not alone. For the last 20 years, Americans have reported increased stress levels. CBN medical reporter Lori Johnson tells us the health ramifications of chronic stress and what you can do to bring a sense of peace into your life.
Whether we're worried about the cost of living, anxious over daily disappointments, or overwhelmed by negative thoughts, stress can prove toxic to the body.
We're all under too much stress, whether we notice it or not.
Psychologist Alyssa Epple researches how chronic stress can damage the body and says it goes all the way down to the cellular level. Scientists say stress triggers a chain reaction in the body that can end up shortening the telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of our chromosomes. Short telomeres often predict earlier onset of disease and death. The good news is we can turn things around before they reach that state. In her book, The Stress Prescription, Dr. Epple lists 7 ways to reduce stress, beginning with embracing uncertainty.
How much can you relax if you don't know what will happen tomorrow, or if you don't know how plans will go later? Because it turns out when we're intolerant of uncertainty, we're much more vulnerable to anxiety and depression when stressful things happen.
Another recommendation, let go of what you can't control, referencing the traditional serenity prayer.
That prayer has so much wisdom, and that's why it sticks around.
Then find excitement in challenges instead of fearing them.
Emphasizing your resources and what you can do, and how that can overcome the demand.
You can metabolize body stress through exercise, hot saunas, and cold showers. Also, immerse yourself in nature to help reduce blood pressure and anxiety, and create a sanctuary like a prayer closet to get away from the world.
All sorts of mind-body practices, and I believe, prayer can do this too. We can develop spiritual urgency, not wait till we get sick and then we feel spiritual urgency, but actually realize now the miracle of life, the fragility of life.
Experience deep rest through proper sleep and breathing techniques. And finally, create bliss bookends. That means starting and ending each day with gratitude, while also making strong connections in between.
That is one of the ways that we cope with the big stressors especially well, is really through relationships, supportive relationships.
Even people we don't know.
So kind acts to strangers in one study had beautiful effects on gene expression for inflammation.
So while we can't ignore the problems in our lives, we can respond to them differently and hopefully feel a greater sense of peace and joy. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
A bombshell from Beth Moore. She's opened up about her childhood abuse before, but now she's ready to name the man behind it. That story next. Bible teacher and best-selling author Beth Moore is known worldwide for her ministry. In her new memoir, she opens up about some of the difficulties she's faced, from childhood abuse to challenges in her marriage. In the book, Moore holds nothing back. She sat down with CBN's Charlene Aaron to discuss.
In her latest book, All My Knotted Up Life, Beth Moore delivers a compelling self-portrait filled with unexpected twists and turns, with the final destination being God's enduring love and faithfulness. CBN News sat down with the prominent Christian leader at her Living Proof Ministry headquarters in Houston, Texas. We talked just days after the sudden loss of her brother Wayne, who, along with her other siblings, appear on the cover of her new book.
I just looked up to him and just loved him so, so much. We are reeling. But I had gotten him an advance copy of the memoir, and it has moved me so much to know that he got to see himself through my eyes in those pages.
The title, All My Knotted Up Life, parallels Moore's difficult childhood in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. Why did you feel the need to be so vulnerable and so open about?
I've always tried to be transparent in what I shared, but I just get to be a little more specific this time around.
Over the years, Moore has often talked about her childhood sexual abuse. For the first time, she reveals her father as her abuser.
I'm not sure anything impacts the life more than your protector being your perpetrator. In other words, my father was the person on earth that I could trust the least.
Growing up, this secret weighed heavily upon her.
Normally, there is a sense of threat. Like, he would not have said, you better not ever tell this. But what he did say over and over was that we had to protect my mom because she was not stable. So he used that. So there was like, I'm going to not only split up my entire family, but I'm going to cause my mother to kill herself.
Moore says her father's active participation in their local church made living with her abuse even harder.
I got to watch him just, prance up and down those aisles and teach his classes and usher, and the confusion of that. The very fact that within those walls, I believed my Sunday school teachers over what I was seeing with authority at home, to me is a testimony of God's grace.
A grace she would need in an even greater way later in life, in her constant struggle with the bad memories.
I definitely had a death wish, definitely. It seemed to me at several points in my life, this is the only way out.
The Bible teacher also shares about challenges with her husband's mental illness, how it has shaped her marriage of 45 years.
The thing about what Keith had dealt with very severe PTSD and then bipolar, you never knew when there was going to be a sudden episode.
As Moore reflected on those dark days, she saw hope as her anchor.
I never knew what was coming when the sun came up, and neither did he. Neither did he. We had no idea what that day was going to hold. It might be wonderful. It might, before the sun set, it might be frightful. I guess the best thing that has come out of it for me and for us is that you talk about a woman casting herself on Jesus.
While crediting God for holding her family together, Moore quickly points out how therapy also helped with her healing.
Support is a necessity, be it therapists, be it a small group, whatever it is, but there is such a sense of being locked in it anyway that there has to be a way that we are able to be around others and communicate with others.
Moore has also seen her share of controversies. In 2016, she tweeted about the sexual abuse scandal involving then GOP presidential nominee Donald Trump. The backlash from churches was swift. She writes in her memoir, "Daily I received word that my Bible studies were being pulled out of more churches. Some were boxed up and sent back to us. I was told some of them were burned."
It affected me and my family profoundly. the whole face of the ministry changed dramatically.
For years, Moore's teachings had been a feature of the Southern Baptist Convention, the denomination she had been a part of her entire life. It was there that she was baptized and began her love of Scripture. In 2021, she found herself increasingly at odds with SBC leadership over issues ranging from women's roles in ministry, racial justice, and more specifically, its failure to care for sexual abuse victims.
We've been taught somehow that the right thing to do is shelter the abuser, and to the degree that we have somehow distorted such a doctrine of grace that we then are not protecting the abused.
Moore eventually decided to leave.
That was like a death that will probably take me a lifetime for whatever's left to continue to process. These are people I have and do love very much.
Beth, you have demonstrated faithfulness to God, forgiveness, perseverance through all that you've endured. How did you tap into that grace and that strength? And how challenging has it been to minister to people even when you had personal issues going on in your life?
I can't go back and relive my life. I can't go back and make 1,000 decisions differently, which I wish I could do. I can't rewrite it. It's just what it is. But I can see to it that the grace that the Lord has poured on me is not in vain. That is my hope.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News, Houston.
And we will be right back after this. You can buy the book where books are sold. Finally tonight, with all of the seriousness in Washington, D.C., sometimes you just need a little comic relief. Content creator and writer Dan Szymborski is bringing people that by way of cartoon. Using artificial intelligence, he transformed all 46 U.S. presidents into Pixar characters. Szymborski also shared the outtakes, trying out different shapes, sizes, and likenesses for each president. What a fun idea. All right, that's going to do it for Faith Nation. Have a great night and weekend.